Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my first looks review of the new Nikon full-frame mirrorless system. In North America it's known as the Nikon Z system, but as I'm European I'll be pronouncing it as the Nikon Z. Hope that's alright. As always, if you find my reviews useful, please do like, share, and especially do subscribe, as it really helps my channel grow and lets me bring you more videos. Thanks, and now on with the review. Now this video is not based on spec sheets or speculation. I got to try out the Nikon Z bodies, 2 lenses and the F-mount adapter in person at an official Nikon press event. The gear was pre-production, so I'm not allowed to share actual photos and video from the cameras yet, but it was a good chance to understand the new system and what it offers. Nikon's launched the Z system with 2 new full-frame mirrorless bodies which look identical and share a core set of features, but this is how they differ. The Z6 has 24 megapixels, 100 to 51,200 native ISO, 12 frames per second shooting, 273 AF points, and costs $1,999 or £2,099, while the higher end Z7 has 45 megapixels, 64 to 25,600 native ISO range, 9 frames per second shooting, 493 AF points, and costs $3,399 or pounds. In Nikon's DSLR world, you could sort of think of the Z6 and Z7 as mirrorless versions of the D750 and D850, only with smaller bodies, electronic viewfinders, built-in stabilization, and better movie AF. But the cameras they're actually closest to and eager to rival are Sony's A7 Mark III and A7R Mark III. Nikon sensibly resisted reusing the aging F-mount from its SLRs and instead developed a new Z-mount for the best optical performance. Its 55mm inner diameter is wider than rivals, and the 16mm flange distance is shorter than most too, which should allow some interesting high-performance or bright lenses to be developed. The first exotic lens to really exploit the mount will be the 58mm Noct with an unusually bright f/0.95 focal ratio, although sadly this won't arrive until 2019. At launch in late 2018, there'll just be 3 native lenses, the 24 to 70mm f4 kit zoom, along with the 35mm f1.8 and 50mm f1.8 primes. It's a small but sensible selection to start with, and Nikon's already shared a lens roadmap which promises 9 new lenses by the end of 2020, including more f1.8 primes and a pair of ultra-wide zooms. That said, I would have really liked to see the system launched with at least 1 exotic lens to illustrate the true benefits of the Z-mount right from day one. Nikon also offers the FTZ adapter, which lets you fit any F-mount lens with 93 models supporting autofocus. All lenses you mount also become stabilised by the sensor shift system too, albeit with 3 axes rather than the 5 when you use native lenses. If an adapted lens has optical VR, it takes care of 2 of the axes, leaving the role to the body. I briefly trialled the FTZ adapter with the AFS 14 to 24mm and a DX zoom, and the AF speed felt roughly similar to when they were fitted onto DSLRs, although with the benefit of the broader AF coverage on the new sensors and of course that built-in stabilisation. Returning to the cameras, both the Z6 and Z7 share the same weather-sealed body built to the same standard as the D850. They're both a lot lighter than the high-end DSLR though, at 585 grams or just over 20 ounces, and despite being significantly more compact, they remain comfortable to hold with a decent grip. In a first for Nikon, but a necessary one, the sensor is stabilised within the body using a 5-axis system that's good for around 5 stops of compensation. As I mentioned earlier, it'll stabilise any lens you attach, although if you're using adapted older models, you only get 3 axes of compensation. Still, that does make a big difference. Those full-frame sensors also feature embedded phase detect autofocus across 90% of the frame, horizontally and vertically, with the Z6 and Z7 sporting 273 and 493 AF points respectively. Finally, we get decent autofocus on a Nikon body in live view and filming movies. On the top surface you'll find a thumb wheel, finger dial, and a small but useful OLED display which shows basic shooting information. You can see that adjusting as I change those dials. The layout around the shutter will also be reassuringly familiar to Nikon DSLR owners. There's also an AF on button for back button focusing, an AF joystick, and a collar by the viewfinder to switch between stills and movie capture. Considering they're pitched as high-end pro bodies though, particularly in the case of the Z7, I'm disappointed Nikon didn't make the buttons backlit as it does with their higher-end DSLRs, and it's also interesting to find a mode dial on the left side that's more in common with their consumer DSLRs than the buttons of its pro ones. To me, the controls didn't feel like the significant ergonomic step up from Sony that I'd really hoped for from this Nikon system. The screen is slightly larger than most mirrorless cameras though, at 3.2 inches, and it'll tilt up by 90 degrees or down by about 45, but sadly it won't flip to face forward, so vlogging is going to be pretty tough with these cameras. It is touch sensitive though, and unlike Sony, you can scroll and tap your way through the menus and customizable eye interface, as well as adjust exposure by touch if desired. I particularly like how tapping one of the arrows takes you through third stop increments and the outer arrows in one stop increments. The menus will also be familiar to any Nikon owners and feel better organised than Sony's to me. On the grip side, Nikon's fitted an XQD card slot, making it the first mirrorless camera to have one, and I welcome the chance to use faster cards. But in one of the most disappointing aspects of the camera, there's only one card slot, when all of its high-end rivals have two, even if they're only SD in format. Now this could be a real deal breaker for some photographers, and it's an unusual move for Nikon, who after all fitted twin slots even on its mid-range DSLRs years ago. On the left side, you'll find a USB-C port, which can also be used to charge the battery internally, Type-C HDMI, which can output 4K and 10-bit, take that Sony, an accessory terminal, and microphone and headphone jacks, although not the PC sync port that you'll find on the Sony a7R Mark III. There's also Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which support Nikon's SnapBridge features. In terms of power, the Z6 and Z7 are powered by a new version of the EN-EL15 pack, labelled B in this case, which can be charged externally or internally over USB. Nikon quotes up to 330 shots under super conditions, which is roughly half the quote for Sony's Mark III batteries, but Nikon was keen in its presentations to point out that it's achieved more on its own testing. We'll just have to wait and see how it compares to those Sony bodies. You can, however, also use older EN-EL15 and A packs, but with shorter life and no USB charging in camera. As a mirrorless camera, the Z6 and Z7 are equipped with electronic viewfinders, and Nikon sensibly fitted the best that's available right now, the latest quad VGA OLED panels with 1280 by 960 pixels and a large 0.8 times magnification. It's a great looking viewfinder in practice, but it's essentially the same as its top-end rivals. Here you can see the Z7's viewfinder in action when shooting at the top speed, where there's no live feedback between frames, but also no blackout. I had the camera set to JPEG and 14-bit RAW, and was surprised to see the buffer fill after just 16 shots. Now, if this isn't a pre-production issue, then the Sonys really take the lead on burst depth. Yes, I know it's pre-production, and yes, I know it's 14-bit RAW, but really it should be doing better than that. Fingers crossed. Check out my review at cameralabs.com for my latest tests. Processing is handled by the new XP6 processor, which includes a new mid-range sharpening parameter for finer control over textures. As you'd expect for a high-end camera, there's built-in interval timer and time-lapse movie capabilities, features both notably missing from Sony's Mark III mirrorless cameras. There's no bulb timers on the Z cameras, but the time mode can open the shutter with one tap and close it with another. There's also a silent mode, which uses an electronic shutter for genuinely silent operation. Continuous autofocus is supported, and the burst speed only falls to 8 frames per second on the Z7, although the usual caveats apply. Like most electronic shutters, there can be skewing artifacts if you pan quickly or shoot moving subjects, as seen in this example, so use it with caution. To be fair though, the only camera that really avoids this is the Sony A9. In terms of video, the Z6 and Z7 can film 4K at 24, 25 or 30p, and 1080 at up to 120p with audio too. There's no 4K above 30p, but you do at least get 10-bit 4K over HDMI, and also with Nikon's flat N-Log profile for subsequent grading. There's also focus peaking, zebra patterns, and it's important to remember that the embedded phase detect autofocus system finally allows you to autofocus while filming video on a Nikon, with the chance to also adjust the AF speed and sensitivity too. This is a major upgrade over its DSLRs. The Nikon Z system is an impressive launch into the full-frame mirrorless market, although one that had to match or beat Sony's third-generation bodies from day one. It's not surprising then to find the Z6 and Z7 specifications roughly matching the A7 III and A7R III respectively, although disappointingly there's few aspects where the new Nikons really stand out over their rivals. I had high hopes the controls and ergonomics would be way ahead, but in terms of handling and styling in my brief time with the bodies, they actually feel very close to the Mark III Sonys. I'm pleased to find support for XQD cards, but disappointed there aren't twin slots, and sincerely hope the buffer on final production models is deeper than I found on my test body. Arguably the biggest benefit, literally, is the new Z mount and its potential for exotic and high-performing lenses, although I'm frustrated none of these are available at launch. In my view, Nikon really should have released that 58mm f/0.5 NOC from day one to show why we should be excited about the system. That said, the promise is there, the lens roadmap looks solid, and in the meantime there's decent support for existing f-mount lenses which all enjoy the benefit of built-in stabilisation and broad autofocus coverage across 90% of the frame for stills and movies. As such, the Z6 and Z7 are no-brainers for Nikon DSLR owners looking to go mirrorless, although anyone starting a new system from scratch should really carefully compare Sony's Mark III bodies, which offer roughly similar features at the same price, or in the case of the A7R Mark III, slightly lower. If you found this review useful, please like, share, and again be sure to subscribe. And if you really like it, you can support my work by checking prices or treating me to a coffee using the links below. If you're into photography without post-processing, also check out my in-camera book, which tells the story behind 100 of my favourite travel photos, all JPEGs out of camera with no Photoshop or Lightroom. That's it, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.